to the First Team Fantasy Podcast. We have myself and Schiff here as always. Week 5 is just about over. We have Monday night tonight, and we had some crazy games, some underwhelming games, some games where guys performed extremely well. And in my opinion, this was one of those higher end games. It was the Bucks at the Falcons. The Falcons were able to win 36-30. A very costly Bucky Irving fumble potentially swayed the ending of this game. But it is what it is. Things do happen. For the Bucs side of the ball, they had some good offensive outputs, mainly from Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans. Baker was extremely efficient again. He was 19 of 24 for 180 yards and 3 touchdowns. He got 42 yards on the ground on 6 carries, giving us 23.4. And at this point, Baker is a guy that honestly, he needs to be starting. He needs to be in someone's starting lineup. He's a top 10 fantasy quarterback. He's doing it week in and week out. He did this on the road. The Falcons do not have a rollover secondary. I know Baker's got good weapons, but he's just a guy that's performed every week, and we're now 5 weeks in. So it comes to a point where, he's a guy you just need to have in your lineup. Obviously the same with our two main pass catchers, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Mike Evans caught 2 touchdowns on 5 of his catches for 62 yards. He was targeted 7 times, giving us 23.2. Chris Godwin, I'd like to say he's cooling off a little bit, but it's only because, he's catching a touchdown every single game. He was getting hyper targeted to start the
really
season.
Quick, this just in, Rashee Rice is expected to miss the rest of the season.
And yeah,
it was the 6 to 8 weeks thing swirling around for the last week and a half. So just for anybody thinking that just saw it pop up, just clearing that up.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're good. I mean, that's a bombshell. That's a huge hit for anyone that has Rashee or Patrick Mahomes, for that matter, honestly. But yeah, Chris Godwin was solid in this game. Caught 5 of the 6 targets for 64. He carried it once for 2 yards, giving him 11.6. It was kind of a weird game because you look at the score, the Bucs put up 30 points. They only passed the ball 24 times. And it was just kind of a weird one, but very high-powered. Sterling Shepard got some good run in this one. He was out there for 68% of the snaps, and he caught a 4-yard touchdown for 7.4. Again, do I think he's going to be viable fantasy-wise? No, but I have to give him his shout. It's good to see it. Cade Otton was decently involved, caught 3 of his 4 targets for 44, giving him 7.4. The run game. We're seeing Bucky Irving be involved. He played 43% of the snaps. He had 9 carries for 44 yards, caught both of his targets for 12. He looks good. It's a costly turnover. It's a big turnover. And so he finishes with 5.6, a bit of a disappointing day. He's still running the ball very efficiently. He was out there for a good amount. I mean, almost half the game he was on the field. So going forward, I don't like forcing him into the lineup, but I do think, if you have injuries, whatever the case, he is a guy you can put in, and he does have the ability to, 1, get in the end zone, run the ball hard, and also catch a couple passes out of the backfield. Rachaad White has been running the ball more efficiently. One of our friends put it in our group chat, and I agree. Since Bucky has kind of come on the scene, it does seem like Rachaad White is running the ball a lot harder. He's fighting for his job, and he's been doing it, though. He carried it 10 times for 72 yards, caught all 3 of his targets for -6, giving him 9.6. I think Rachaad White of last year is not the Rachaad White of this year. He's never been efficient on the ground. It's always been his pass catching, but now you have another running back that can run the ball pretty efficiently and just someone to even spell him in that backfield. So we're just not going to see Rachaad White getting us, 20 fantasy points a week like we grew accustomed to last year. And outside of that, Chase McLaughlin was a great start. He gave us 16. And that's really it. They lost a shootout in overtime. It was a good game. Credit to the Falcons.
Yeah, it really was. I know what you mentioned about Baker. One thing that I'd like to add on him is I do still think it's like not matchup dependent, but I think there's game like a bit tougher matchups that I'm still kind of looking at my options. I don't think he's just
Yeah,
an every week like don't even consider starting anybody else type of. But in the same breath, like there's plenty of weeks that I'm starting him over Patrick Mahomes with no question. So
yeah,
it's just that kind of view though. It's like there are not, I don't believe, there aren't as many quarterbacks that you can just sit in your lineup and that's your guy for like all year except the bye week,
I
in all
agree.
honesty.
I agree. It has seemed that way.
But going to the Falcons side of the ball, one of these guys who is going to make for another really good streamer and a guy, why I'm saying you can't just like, I mean, at this point, let's look at Josh Allen's just I know we're skipping ahead a little bit, but looking at
Hmm.
Josh Allen's performance this week, it's like, okay, so we look at some of the matchups and what the Buffalo Bills want to do. They're not throwing the ball a lot. They're not running a whole lot of plays. Their
Hmm.
rush defense is horrible. So it's like, are we obviously, you want to keep Josh Allen in there regardless, but the same with, like I said, Patrick Mahomes. There's going to be weeks where Kirk Cousins, Baker Mayfield are going to be better starts.
Yeah.
Like this one, Kirk Cousins, 42 for 58, 509 passing yards, 4 touchdowns and an interception. It's safe to say Kirk is healthy.
Oh yeah.
35.36 points out of him, depending on what kind of league you're in. He scored 40 plus, but he had an absolute day. And I mean, the Falcons
Hmm.
offense, I am more than happy to, Darnell Mooney, I believe, is a guy who you can probably sell high this week. But I think the thing is, I am selling high. Like, I'm trying to, like, Mooney and something else. I mean, yeah, that's still kind of speculative. You don't know if Tua is even going to come back 100%. But, like, if you want to try to go out and get Reek for Tua's comeback, something like
Yeah.
that. Like, Mooney is looking like he is a reliable piece in a very good offense. So I'm definitely wanting to hold on to him. The problems. Before we get into all the goodness, something that has to be addressed, Bijan Robinson.
Yep.
Um, over the past couple weeks, I mean, in the very first game, we saw, 89% of the snaps to Bijan, only 18 for Algier. Throughout the weeks, it's gotten a bit closer. I mean, 75-21 week 2, 82-21 week 3, then 64-38, 67-36. Uh, I've mentioned before, Tyler Algier is a good running back. I mean, he only had 2 yards per carry this game, but he is a good running back in the NFL. And
Yeah.
I don't think it's as much of an Arthur Smith problem as much as it is just genuinely a Tyler Algier problem for Bijan Robinson owners. He's good enough that they're not just going to leave Bijan on the field for the entire game. They have a running back that can spell him and get yards when he comes in and, actually help out and pass blocks, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But Bijan had 12 attempts in this one, got 61 yards out of those 12 attempts. So it was fairly efficient, but he didn't score. Had 3 receptions on 3 targets for 16 yards, so 10.7 points for him. And then Algier had 6 attempts for only 12 yards, like I said, 2 yards a carry. But he also had 3 targets, which he caught all three of for 13 yards, 5.5 points for him. And I think that's the thing. It's like you'd like to see all of the passing work out of the backfield to go to Bijan Robinson, but some of the times they're putting Algier in and leaving him in for like drives or parts of drives. And he can do a lot. If you remember his rookie season, I think he holds the record for the Falcons for rookie rushing yards.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's not just a bum out there for no reason. And that's something that has to be, I mean, you got to pay attention to that. I don't think Bijan's ever really going to dud you, but for, a lot of leagues, he went third, fourth, higher in the first round.
Hmm.
I don't know. like another guy that we're going to talk about in the next game, I don't know that you're necessarily going to get return on that investment entirely this year.
Yeah.
Going into the receiving room where, damn, that was fun. Um, just going through this, it was really, if you started one of these guys, you probably had a great day. Starting off with Drake London, had 13 targets, which he caught 12 of for 154 yards and a touchdown. 33.4 points for him. It looked like at one point in this game he got a concussion, but he came back in and
Yeah.
kept balling. So I guess that's something to look out for. But yeah, Drake London had a wonderful game. And we're talking about, I think last week, that he's looking like a really, truly safe play every week. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
hesitating. Well, not only is he looking like a safe play, but now he has this week winning potential. And yeah, I'm just absolutely excited. If you have Drake London, this was just wonderful to see. And then also having Darnell Mooney, I talked about, I didn't start him. I started Wicks over him, paid up for Wicks on the waiver wire. Was like, all right, let's see what I got. Well, you know, apparently I should have just left Mooney in from last week. He got 16 targets. Yes, 16. And he caught 9 of them for 105. Also got 2 touchdowns, 31.5 points for him. Honestly, he should have had another like really nice catch over them. It just hit his hands. He dropped it. They ended up
Yeah.
going back to him, and he caught another pass. But clearly, he is one of Kirk's favorite targets, and he's not like a guy that I absolutely like have to find a way to get in my lineup every week. But he's a guy like that. If I have an injury, if I have guys on bye, he's in my lineup with no question at this point. I mean,
Yeah.
I've seen enough, and he has played over 90% of the snaps in every single one of the Falcons' 5 games so far. He has, in fact, the most snaps out of the Falcons' wide receiving core.
Mm-hmm.
6 more than Drake London, because Drake London, he's gotten banged up on a play here or there, but yeah, I mean, the only person who's played more snaps on the Falcons offense than Darnell Mooney is Kirk Cousins himself. So he's out there. Kirk relies on him. I think he's a great play week in and week out. Um, yeah, and even Ray McLeod, 9 targets, caught 6 of them for 66 yards, 12.6 points for him. Kadero Hodge.
Yeah.
I believe what happened was when I'm not sure who went down. Was it Ray McLeod at the very end of the game? Or so, because literally Kadero Hodge comes in for like 2 plays and gets those 2 catches. The first one and then the second one he breaks for the touchdown.
I could be wrong. Honestly, I want to say it was Drake London.
It might have been
I
London.
think it was
I'm
Drake
not sure
London that
exactly
got
who it was.
knocked out for a play or two, and then yeah, Cordell Hodge
Yeah, and
just
he comes
came
in,
in
no,
and
in overtime, literally comes in, catches 2 passes, and ices the game. It was pretty incredible, and he ends up getting 14.7 points. Not that anyone started him unless you're in a 32-man league, but just something to note. And then
yeah,
Kyle Pitts, he came through. I gave him quite a hard time coming into this game, but something I also do want to mention, Kirk Cousins threw the ball 58 times.
yeah,
Just don't expect this. Like, it was a good game. But if he throws the ball 58 times, I mean, you see Ray McLeod had 9 targets. It's like there is going to be a lot to go around. The
yeah,
most concerning part to me was the, limitation of Bijan Robinson when the Falcons scored 36 points. But I mean, when the Falcons are playing in a game like this, Kyle Pitts will be involved. But I think it's pretty obvious at this point the main 2 targets are Mooney and London.
yeah,
And that's not really a question. Oh, and then yeah, of course, got to shout out Young Wake, who added on another 15 points. He's out here putting up wide receiver 1 numbers every week.
yeah.
It's
I think the one saving grace some people can look at for Bijan is the first 4 weeks were a bit of rougher matchups. Like they did play Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Kansas City, New Orleans. This is what I felt like should have been a bit more of a get right game through the air, but we know the Bucks with Vita Vea back. They are decent against the run. That is their go-to. This coming week against Carolina, I'm going to hope for more from Bijan, but absolutely, dude, he's the running back 18 after 5 weeks. And you drafted him as the
Yeah,
running
we
back
did
1
not
through
draft
3.
him to be a serviceable RB2, so
He definitely
it,
has not performed
he's
to his
not betting you,
expectation,
but it is disappointing.
for sure.
Very disappointing to say the least. Yeah, I think the game against Carolina should be a get right game, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Going into our first London game of the year, the Vikings are a very interesting team. This is the second week in a row they got out to a really hot start and almost allowed their opposing team to come back and win.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the Jets ended up losing 17-23, but I mean, Aaron Rodgers honestly had a horrible game.
Yeah.
And he did. He threw pick six and then two other interceptions. He was kind of all over the place. He threw the ball 54 times, completed 29 of those for 244 yards, and did get two touchdowns. So he scored 14.8 points on the day. The Vikings, as we know, have a good defense. Um, as Derek will tell you, they were the number one fantasy defense coming into this game, and
They're probably
they
still the number one.
they continued to add on points to that. So, but we weren't really starting Aaron Rodgers at this point, anything
Yeah.
of that mattered. The concern that we have is with Breece Hall, because this is 2 weeks in a row where he's been fairly non-existent. Under 10 points 2 weeks in a row, had 9 attempts for 23 yards. Unfortunately, caught 3 passes on 4 targets for 14 to kind of inch him along towards decency. Had 6.7 points. And then Braylon Allen had 5 attempts for 13 yards, caught one of his 2 passes for 15. Obviously, if you had watched this game, which if you didn't, I don't blame you. It started at 6:30 in the morning. Um, the Jet the Jets were down almost immediately,
Mm-hmm.
and they were playing catch up like the whole game. They couldn't really run the ball that much if they wanted to. As you see, only 14 rushing attempts and 54 passing attempts. But Brees Hall still played 74% of the snaps to Braylon Allen's 26. It's just not there with that offense right now.
Yeah.
And if it's going to be a consistent thing where they get in holes because they can't score early in the game, this is going to continue to happen where they have to pass the ball. They're not going to have a choice. I mean, their defense is good, but it's kind of like we see with the Browns. And you'd hope and you see that there obviously is a lot more talent on this roster than there is, I can't even say talent because the Browns do have talent on that roster. But this is a better working offense than the Browns. But you see what happens with a good defense when they're constantly on the field because the offense can't move the ball. They're constantly having to punt or turning it over.
Mm-hmm.
Um, an absolute breakout game from Garrett Wilson. One thing that I did mention, I said it might be a tough start, but regardless of anything, I'm always leaving him in because I know the target share is going to be there. When I said that, I did not have 22 targets in mind.
No. No.
But that happened. That did happen. He got 22 targets, caught 13 of them for 101 and a touchdown, 29.1 points out of him. We finally saw like this is what we drafted Garrett Wilson at the 1-2 turn for.
Yeah.
Like games like this. And if we can continue to see performances like this, and this is with Stephon Gilmore guarding him for a majority of the game.
Mm-hmm.
So it got to the point where Aaron Rodgers just said, F it, we're going to force the ball to the best player on this team. It almost worked at the end of the day. They almost came through and won. They didn't. But moving forward, I was still starting Garrett Wilson anyways, as I said, but I'm a lot more comfortable after this game.
Yeah.
Alan Lazard added yet another touchdown on 10 targets, caught 4 of them for 34 with that touchdown, 13.4 points. Mike Williams got 4 targets, caught 2 of them for 25, 4.5 points out of him. And then Tyler Conklin, Derek, that was a good call. Caught 6 of his 9 targets for
Yeah.
55 yards, giving him 11.5 points, which we know for a tight end is something that we can look at and
Yeah.
be happy with ourselves. You can look yourself in the mirror after starting Tyler Conklin, getting 11.5. Greg Zerline added 5 points, and the Jets D added 9, and that's about all I have for this London game.
Yeah, it's crazy that, the top three running backs, the three running backs going in the first round, McCaffrey, Bijan, and Brees. Obviously, McCaffrey hasn't played. Brees is the RB13, and Bijan was the RB18. So, our top three RBs have not been holding their value so far. The Vikings side of the ball was something, Sam Darnold, he was off to a hot start, just like Baker Mayfield. And I knew this one was going to be a weird matchup. The Jets have a good secondary. The Jets hadn't necessarily played the toughest opponents just yet, but their secondary did show they are good and capable of shutting down quarterbacks. And Sam Darnold struggled pretty heavily in this one. He was 14 of 31 for 179 yards. He did not throw a touchdown. He threw an interception, carried it 5 times for 11 yards, giving us 5.26. If you had Darnold or you're able to pick him up and this was the week you threw him in, I am sorry. I think there's much better weeks to come. But again, one, they played on a different continent. First off, they played across the pond. They played in the UK. It's just one of those games, Sam Darnold, like we said, there's only a few quarterbacks, the Lamars, I guess at this point, the Joe Burrows. There's very few quarterbacks we're going to keep in no matter the matchup, and Sam Darnold is not included in that list. He is susceptible to have these rough games. It was just unfortunate it hit the very first bye week where you may have not had an option but to put him in, and he's been very solid, so with good reason.
Well, I think the other thing is we learned something big about the Vikings offense, and that's how important that Aaron Jones really is to them.
For sure.
Because they were clicking until he went out and Ty Chandler came in and fumbled.
Yeah, no,
I mean, because he does, like, one of Aaron Jones' best assets is his ability as a pass catcher. And you take that away. I mean, it's kind of like we said with Joe Mixon, with the Bengals offense through the beginning. I mean, obviously they got rolling, but in the beginning, like, it was kind of like, hey, you take away like this important asset to this team. And that's kind of what Aaron Jones is to the Vikings. And we saw that live in action.
Yeah, it definitely showed. Aaron Jones left with that hip injury. He only played 22% of the snaps. He'd gotten 29 yards on 7 carries. He'd caught his lone target for 24 yards. He still gave you 6.3 before the injury. He was off to a good start. He was going to have a good game. It's unfortunate to see it. And then, Ty Chandler comes in and he just wasn't efficient. He had 14 carries for 30 yards, caught both his targets for 9. It gave him 5.9. He played 63% of the snaps. CJ Ham came in there and sniped him on the touchdown. You absolutely hate to see that, but at the same time, I hope you weren't starting Ty Chandler. So once Aaron Jones is out, you'd like to see it be Ty Chandler in case you have the handcuff and Aaron Jones were to miss time, but CJ Ham takes that. Myles Gaskin got a couple runs. He only played 7% of snaps. It looks like if Aaron Jones does happen to miss a week or whatever, it's going to be Ty Chandler with an awkward amount of CJ Ham on the field as well. The pass catchers, Jetta's got it done without getting in the end zone. He was targeted 14 times. He caught 6 of them for 92 yards, giving him 15.2. If you got fantasy points for getting your team penalty yards, though, oh my goodness. It seemed every single play was a PI, a holding. Jetta's would have had 30 fantasy points if he was not having some type of penalty committed on him every time.
And I guess another thing to bring up, it's like, you say that. Another thing is, like, I wonder how many penalty yards did they draw? Because a lot of those would have been passing yards to Sam Darnold as well. But
it would have been a much better day.
It is pretty funny because if you watched the game, it was ridiculous. Sam Darnold just kind of figured out, if I throw it towards Justin Jefferson, he's either going to catch it or it's going to be a PI.
Yeah.
And it was hardly, I think it was like 2 or 3 times that there was another result other than those two.
Yeah, no, I mean, for sure. It didn't matter if it was Reed. It didn't matter if it was Sauce. It was a flag coming. So, but he still had a solid day, 15.2. Jordan Addison, cannot say the same about him. He only caught 3 of his 8 targets for 36 yards, giving him 6.6. And again, Sam Darnold only threw for 179 yards. 24 of those went to Aaron Jones for the injury, and 92 went to Jettas. So there wasn't much left over. Jalen Naylor was out there for 56% of the snaps, getting cardio. He did not get targeted once. And Johnny Munt caught both of his targets for 31 yards, giving him 5.1. Vikings kicker again was very solid. He gave us 16. And the defense gave us 17. If the Vikings defense, for whatever reason, they're 73% rostered, but if they are available, no, they have a bye. All right, well, but they are a very good defense. They're the number 1 fantasy defense, and yeah, they did hold that value, so that was worth noting. But it was an ugly game. The Vikings managed to stay undefeated, and sadly for us, I'm sure their coaching staff doesn't care if some of our guys had bad fantasy days. They got the win, and they move on.
They
So
never care.
we just have to adapt from there.
Yeah.
Gosh, our next one is very ugly. It's the Bills at the Texans, and I'm not going to say, that before the season when we did our boom bust, I did list Josh Allen as my bust quarterback. And coming into this, he had 2 really good weeks and 2 really bad weeks. His fantasy score in this game does not talk about how bad of a game it was for anyone outside of James Cook on this Bills offense. They somehow only lost 20-23. Josh Allen completed 9 passes on 30 attempts. That's less than a 33% completion rate. It was not good. He did throw a touchdown. He carried the ball 4 times for 54 yards. It gave him 14.6. It was not a good week, though. It was just not. And obviously, you can imagine the pass catchers heavily felt that. Without Khalil Shakir, we wondered who would step
like a
up.
rich man's Taysom Hill in this one.
Yeah, gosh, that is insane. But yes, a very highly. Taysom Hill's highly paid, and even higher paid Taysom Hill. Yeah, Keon Coleman, I guess, served as the wide receiver 1. He was targeted 5 times. He only caught 1 for 49-yard touchdown. So if you did start him, he gave you 11.9. But that is not something I am putting chips on going forward. He caught 1 of his targets. It was a rough one. Again, he completed 9 passes. 2 went to Mac Hollins for 27, giving him 4.7. 1 went to Curtis Samuel on his 4 targets for 0 yards. He rushed it 1 time for negative yard, giving him 0.9. Kincaid only caught 2 of his 6 for 34, giving him 5.4. It just was not a good day all around. James,
what are you doing with Kincaid at this point? He's not goosing you, but so for example, I have Pat Fryermuth and Dalton Kincaid. And I'm at the point where I'm thinking about either shopping Kincaid or just benching him for Fryermuth until the Bills' offense starts to pick it up. But that's kind of the question: is it going to?
I don't
Are
know. And their next 3 games are at the Jets, who do have a good pass defense, against Tennessee. We've talked about their secondary. They got 2 dogs in that secondary. And then at Seattle. I'm heavily considering Freiermuth going forward. It's how they go to work. And I know the Steelers aren't some, crazy good offense. Like, it's not like Freiermuth's having endless more opportunities, but it does seem like he's getting better looks at the very least. It's definitely worth being heavy concerned because I'm not even going to sit here and be like, oh, well, they didn't have Khalil Shakir, and that's why Josh Allen went 9 for 30. Like this guy is Stephon Diggs or something, you know? So it was just a terrible week. And I don't know, especially because they only lost by 3. They still could have almost won this game. It took a Kaime Fairbairn. I'll let you cover it. But it just, yeah, out
Yeah, I mean, he had a last second field goal. And
a deep one to even win the game. So the Bills still almost pulled this out. And a lot of that was because of James Cook. He was very solid again. 20 carries for 82 yards and a touchdown. Caught 2 of his 3 targets for 17, gave us 17.9. Very solid for him. From the other running backs, we didn't see much involvement. Ty Johnson was out there for 34% of snaps, but he only carried it 3 times for 15 yards. Ray Davis only played 3% of snaps, caught his lone reception for 4. It is only James Cook really there. And I mean, outside of that, Tyler Bass gave us 8. You know, it wasn't a good day, man. The Bills' offense does not look good.
yeah, no, so an offense that, I was excited to have Kincaid going into the year, and now it's looking a little shaky. It's like, am I waiting for something that's never going to happen? But going to the other side of the ball, CJ Stroud had a decent enough day. I mean, 28 for 38, 331 yards, a touchdown and an interception. I believe he also lost a fumble. Um,
Yeah.
so he also rushed the ball 3 times for 27 yards, which is a bit unlikely for him. So it's fun to see him run the ball sometimes. But he finishes with 16.9 points. Like I said, not awful. It's a serviceable day.
Yeah.
Um, not again, it's like was one of our worries with drafting him really high as well. To just kind of, he's not throwing a whole bunch of touchdowns. All those passing yards don't equate to too much when you're not really running the ball at all.
Yeah.
Like we'll talk about Mike Kyler later on. Kyler's passing numbers weren't the greatest, but he had like 88 rushing yards and a touchdown on the ground. So it's like those things that make up for it when Kyler went like 2 rounds later in the draft. So those are just things to think about, like moving forward and moving on. But like I said, Stroud had a serviceable day. It's just serviceable is not really what we're hoping for.
Yeah.
Cam Akers ran the ball 9 times for 42 yards and a touchdown. He also caught 2 of his 3 passes for 5 yards, so he had 12.7 points. Funny enough, though, he did not lead the running back room in carries or snaps. He was vastly outsnapped by Dare Ngumbawale, who had 68% of the snaps. And honestly, like, if you did happen to start Ogunbowale this week, if you made the speculative play, you needed a running back. I mean, have seen the passes that he's been catching. Well, he had 15 rushing attempts for 30 yards, which is abysmal, but he also caught 6 of 7 of his targets for 57 yards.
Yep.
So that's 14.7 points if you're playing PPR. And for an Agumba Wale start on one of your running backs got injured, or you had Gibbs and Montgomery, something along those lines, that's great. Like, you
Yeah.
can't really ask for too much more for a 1 week just flyer.
Yeah.
Um, we did see Nico Collins go down early in this game after he got that amazing 67-yard touchdown. I guess he ran a little too fast. His hamstring tightened up. Hopefully he is okay. But he caught both of his targets for 78 yards and that touchdown. So he got 15.8 points before he exited the game. Um, Stephon Diggs, it seems they did make a concerted effort to get him the ball. He got 8 targets, caught 6 of them for 82 yards, 14.2 points. They won. Good game for Diggs.
Yeah.
Tank Dell uh, got 4 targets, caught all of them for 38 yards. Also had 1 rush for -5 yards. So he finished with 7.3 points. Just hoping to see a bit more out of him. I think at some point, I can't even say I truly think at some point, like, I'd hope at some point that it kind of switches from Stephon Diggs to Tank Dell, but can't really know or say.
Yeah.
As far as right now, Diggs is the better option without a doubt, but it's not like I'm dropping Tank Dell or any. We've seen what he can do on this team, so
Yeah.
moving forward, I'm currently just hoping for better days. Dalton Schultz caught 4 of his 6 targets for 34 yards, giving him 7.4. Xavier Hutchinson added another 2 catches on 3 targets for 31 yards. And Cade Stover had a little sighting, caught both of his passes for 6 yards. Kamai Fairbairn, as Derek mentioned, had another great fantasy
Hmm.
day. Hit that 59-yarder to win the game and ended with 16 fantasy points. So it
Yeah.
was a great day if you had Fairbairn.
Yeah, and really quick,
Oh,
just to touch on CJ Stroud, like you said, he's, kind of just sneaking by. He played 15 games last season. He finished as the QB 11 on the season. So far, through 5 games, he has 85 points flat. So he's on track to get 255 fantasy points. He had 281 through 15 last season. So he's actually on a lower pace than last season. And people were hoping, he finished QB 11. He played 3 less games than possible. He's going to take that step forward. It just hasn't seemed completely like he's going to just yet. So, yeah, it's worth talking about.
yeah, and I think the big thing was, he had uh y- probably how people looked at, when Tua was healthy and that Dolphins offense is in full, how good of a quarterback Tua was at times with, all those options around, how good of a fantasy quarterback Tua was, and kind of hoping that CJ Stroud can kind of do the same thing with Nico, Tank, and Stephon Diggs,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not as easy to it's a lot of touchdowns that have to be thrown.
Yeah,
And like I said, you could have a 331-yard day and it's still just not going to equate to the same fantasy points.
for sure.
Going into the next ass whooping,
Yeah.
the Browns forgot to show up and got beat 34-13 in Washington. Deshaun Watson just does not look good at football right now. Um, I don't know if he will be again. Yet another game under 200 yards. He was 15 for 28 for 129 and a touchdown. Um, Also ran the ball 3 times for 14 yards and fumbled once. So 8.4 points out of him. Sorry if you listened to me and thought that he might actually be a decent streaming option this week. He was not. He was not at all. Him and Sam Darnold
Yeah.
were um sometimes, yeah, that was an L. But it has solidified for me that Deshaun Watson is just unplayable, and the Browns are almost unwatchable while he is playing quarterback for them.
Yeah.
Um, it's just bad, and I mean, you can't expect too much out of anybody on this team right now. I feel like they're just not good. This is easily one of the worst teams in football at this moment.
Yeah.
I They would have been so much better if they had kept Joe Flacco. I mean, Jameis completed his one pass for 16 yards. It would probably be more fun to watch with Jameis, but
Yeah.
it's just pathetic. And Jerome Ford ran the ball 9 times for 47 yards. Deontay Foreman ran 9 times for 44, and Pierre Strong, for some reason, had a
Hmm.
2-yard rush. Um, Ford added 3 catches on 3 targets for 2 yards, giving him 7.9 points. And then Foreman had one 16-yard catch on 1 target for 7 points. So had the two of them combined into one running back, it was a fairly decent game, but they
Yeah.
split everything practically down the middle, and yeah, disgustingness.
Yeah.
Um, in actuality, Jerome Ford got 58% of the snaps and Deontay Foreman got 34, but you could see with the opportunities being so close, it didn't really matter that much. And they were getting stomped on. So it
Yeah.
wasn't like they had the opportunity to run the ball much. Amari Cooper did have 10 targets, which he caught 4 of for 60 yards, so 10 points out of him. It's just, I mean, it's what we talked about. It's just a lot of these targets aren't even catchable with Watson. So, but that was the best performance for the wide receivers or any of the pass catchers at all. Jordan Akins caught all three of his targets for 22 yards and a touchdown. So he had 11.2, kind of the day you were hoping David Njoku would have, but he did get injured. Caught the first pass of the game, though, for 14 yards, and then got 2 targets after that, which he did not catch. But he's getting an MRI on his knee. Unfortunately, it's not even the same injury that he previously had. So not looking too good for him right now, at
Yeah.
least for a return for next week. Who knows what it's going to be. Looking for the information on that. So yeah, he ended with 2.4 points, and then Jerry Jeudy caught one of his 3 targets for 16, 2.6. Elijah Moore caught 3 of his 4 for. I mean, honestly, I don't think anybody on this team is startable on a week-to-week basis aside from Amari Cooper, and you're just hoping that he gets a touchdown because
Yeah.
it's the same thing as Garrett Wilson. It's like even though guys like that, when they're getting like 9, 10 targets a game, you have to stay the course because there are going to be games, regardless of how bad Deshaun Watson is. He is still an NFL quarterback, and there's going to be times where they connect and he hits him for. In the game they played against you guys, they had, what was it, like an 80-yard touchdown or something that got called back on a
Called
hold.
back. It
It's
would have been
still
that would have. He
no,
finished with seven
exactly,
and
and
a
it's
half. He would have
still.
finished with 20. Like
And
that's how close it was.
that's what I'm saying. It's still there. So I'm still rolling with him. You're just hoping to see it a bit more.
Yeah.
Hoping to see those targets come through. Honestly, I don't have too much else to say about this team.
Yeah. No, and it is also worth noting that Amari Cooper is also a name being thrown around in potential trades. So keep an eye on that if he did happen to move to a better situation that could heavily benefit him. But yeah, he's been targeted at least 8 times in every single NFL game. It's hard to keep him off or out of your lineup, but it does not look good. And it has looked very good on the other side of the ball. The Commanders are rolling. Jaden Daniels had another solid game. He was 14 of 25 for 238 yards, a touchdown, an interception, 11 carries for 82 yards, giving him 20.7 fantasy points. He has been absolutely electric. And, I mean, no, we're at the point. Jaden Daniels is on that short list of guys we have to throw in, no?
Oh, yeah, what? Yeah.
It's just crazy. You know what I mean? It's crazy to be like, he's on that list. But I think he is.
I have Jordan Love and Jaden Daniels. The Commanders play the Ravens next week, and I'm not making the change.
Yeah.
The funniest thing was that I just drafted Jaden Daniels just because I just wanted to have him. Like, it was in our secondary league. I just wanted to have him in the league. And even though I had Jordan Love, Love goes down. Jaden Daniels goes in. Now it's kind of the other way around, that if
Yeah.
Jaden Daniels happens to get hurt, oh, then I
Then
got
Love
Jordan
can go
Love.
back in. Yeah.
It's just funny how it started, and 5 weeks in, this is the point that we're at.
Yeah, for sure. But he's been absolutely balling. It's honestly incredible to see from a rookie so early on. Brian Robinson came into this one banged up with that knee injury. We talked about that he was going to be a game time decision. He did end up playing on a very limited capacity. He only carried the ball 7 times for 18 yards. Lucky for you, he got in the end zone twice. He only played 34% of snaps, but he still got us 13.8 with those 2 touchdowns. Solid day from him, but something to monitor going forward because they weren't lying when they said he's going to play a very limited amount. He did. Although with the score the way it was, he didn't have to play that much more.
Hey, honestly though, I gotta say, shout out to the Commanders. Usually, like, just in situations like this, it is never very fantasy friendly. It's like, it's game time decision. Oh, what do I do? All right.
Yeah.
Shout out to Cliff Kingsbury and the Commanders for getting him the 2 touchdowns
Yeah.
when, for all those people that left him in. I just wanted to throw that out there because that does not happen often. You usually get burned.
Yeah.
You were like the T. Higgins times.
No, that's not even right
I
to bring
know,
up. I
but
don't know why you'd say that to me. That's
because it's a perfect example
no,
of
it
what can
is.
happen to you.
Yeah. T. Higgins is gonna plays one snap, and he's done, dude. Like, it's unbelievable. But yeah, Brian Robinson got it done. Austin Eckler goes double digits again. He's as consistent as they come, man. 6 carries for 67 yards. Caught both his targets for 30, 11.7. Book it. Played 49% of snaps. We say he's not going to win you weeks, but he's sure as hell not going to lose you a week either. So he's been solid. And then we saw Jeremy McNichols get some run in
Scored
this one.
again.
He did score again. Carried the ball 7 times for 44 yards and a touchdown, giving him 10.4, played 22% of snaps. It is what it is. Obviously, once Brian Robinson ramps back up, he's going to fade away, but he will be awkwardly involved as long as Brian Robinson isn't 100%. Scary Terry had another solid game. Caught 4 of his 8 targets for 112. Carried it 1 time for 2 yards. I do believe he lost a fumble though, because he did finish with 13.4 instead of what would have been 15.4. Still a decent week from him. And De'Ami Brown caught both his targets for 57 yards and a touchdown. Yeah, it's going to happen. He gets 13.7. He had like 8 fantasy points combined through the first 4 weeks. So do what you want with that information. I'm not even going to talk about him anymore. Luke McCaffrey caught all 3 of his targets for 19, giving him 4.9. Our guy Zach Ertz, he burned us a little bit this week. He only caught 2 of his targets for 10 yards, giving us 3, so it was a rough week. But of course, it was the week where he was targeted 8 times. He saw his most targets and had his least productive week. It's only right. It's only right that would happen.
I mean, I took his yards on a play, so I got burned too.
Yeah, it sucks to see, but he did. On a brighter note, 8 targets, man. He is going to be involved in this offense going forward. He'll have better weeks than that as long as he's healthy. Austin Siebert gave us 10, and the defense gave us 14, surprisingly. So what was an unplayable Commanders defense, I don't know if it says more about their defense or the Browns offense, but I'm going to go with the latter in that one. So our next game was a fun one, man. And it's a game that I did think the Jaguars would win, which they did, barely. It was the Colts going into Jacksonville and losing 37-34 to the Jaguars. Anthony Richardson was unable to go with that hip injury, so we saw Joe Flacco. And Joe Flacco does not disappoint when he is in there. 33 of 44, 359 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, 3 carries for 22 yards, most of those coming on 1 rush, where he was running the freaking field, though. He started on the right side. He's cutting across the middle all the way to the sideline on the left. Run, Joe, run. I don't know what else to say. I mean, I'm happy for the guy. He had an incredible game. 26.5 fantasy points. In a game without Jonathan Taylor. So, obviously that's their best piece on offense. And they were still able to get it done fantasy-wise. The guy that people were starting as his backup, obviously, Trey Sermon, wasn't crazy efficient on the ground. 10 carries for 38 yards, but did get in the end zone. Caught all 6 of his targets for 25 yards, giving him 18.3. He played 59% of the snaps, and that is because Tyler Goodson played the other 41%. Carried it 5 times for 26, caught all 3 of his targets for 31, gave him 8.7. I actually had a league where a guy played Tyler Goodson because he missed out on Trey Sermon. He had Jonathan Taylor, and I think he had Montgomery and Pollard both on bye. He had to go dirty. That's all that was left was Tyler Goodson. And it gave him 8.7. You got to admit, that's not bad for digging in the dump for it. So I was like, fair play to you, man. He was involved. Our pass catchers all had solid days. Michael Pittman caught 5 of his 8 targets, but only for 37 yards. He did catch a touchdown, giving him 14.7. A solid day for Michael Pittman, though. No, we'll
We
take
got a
it.
touchdown out of Pittman.
And
We
from
got a touchdown.
and after what we've seen from Anthony Richardson, anything over 10, I think we're accepting. And it goes to show Joe Flacco can get it to his guys. Josh Downs, he came back. He's by far the number 2 receiver. He might be the number 1, at least with targets. There's potential in some games. He can be the most targeted guy, and he was in this one. 12 targets, caught 9 of them for 69, giving him 15.9. Alec Pierce got in on it. He was only targeted 3 times, but he caught all 3, including a bomb. It just does show Anthony Richardson's not the only guy that can find him down there. Joe Flacco found him as well.
He almost had before they overruled it, he had 2 touchdowns. Obviously, he didn't because he was down on the 1. But
yeah, dude,
he almost had 2 absolute bomb touchdowns.
Yeah, I mean, 3 for 134 and a touchdown gives you 22.4. I don't know what to do with that information because I still don't think he's like a safe play week to week, but he is a home run play, to say the least. If you are down, an awkward amount and you're like, the guy I have in is safer, but he's probably like a Tyler Lockett that's going to get me around 10, somewhere in there, and you need something more, Alec Pierce can be that guy for you. Even Adonai Mitchell only played 27% of snaps, 7 targets in that time, caught 4 of them for 38, had a carry for 4, giving him 9.16. I'll be honest, I didn't watch all of this game, and reading through like his stats from the game, I don't understand how he ended up with 9.16. It doesn't, I don't think you do either. Okay, fair enough. Because I was doing the math from his catches, it'd be 7.8. He had the rush for 4, which would give him 8.2. And I'm like, why is he at 9.16? It's such an exact amount. So I am not completely sure. He may have thrown a pass or something. I don't know. But outside of him,
Yeah, he completed a pass for 24 yards.
there it is. There's his 9.16. I was like, he had to have, because I just don't. Yeah, but
Completed a 24-yard pass.
yeah, even Mo Alley Cox found the end zone. He caught 2 of his 4 targets for 37 yards, given a touchdown, 11.7. He's not a guy we're going to start, obviously. Matt Gay gave us 10, and the defense obviously did not have a good day.
Yeah. Well, Jacksonville Jaguars. I've been waiting for this. Just to clarify for the people, in our Dynasty League that the both of us are in, I have the Trevor Lawrence and Brian Thomas Jr. stack after I recently traded for Brian Thomas Jr.
Mm-hmm.
This is the game that I've been waiting for. This is why I went out and got Brian Thomas Jr. I think this is what not we can expect every week from him, but he is going to be a guy like a superstar in this league, in my opinion. I'm going to stand on that hill.
Yeah.
Trevor Lawrence, though, getting back to him, had a very good game, 28 for 34, 371 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Also had 2 rushing attempts for 4 yards, 22.2 points for him. Again, I said over and over and over again, there are plenty of guys that I would have started Trevor Lawrence over this week, and it was right about something. It's been crazy trying to predict things, but this was one that I didn't think it was that hard, and you didn't have to really think that hard about. It was a great matchup. The process was there. He came through, got it done. Travis Etienne brings up an issue that it's going to be kind of uncomfortable to talk about because he played 38% of the snaps in this one, and Tank Bigsby played 40% of the snaps. You'd like to say, okay, well, maybe this was just one off. Travis Etienne had 6 attempts for 17 yards, where Tank Bigsby had 13 for 101 and 2 touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, Travis Etienne added 43 yards on 6 catches on 7 targets. So he had 12 points, but Bigsby also added a catch on his lone target for 28, lost a fumble, still ended with 25.9 fantasy points.
Yeah.
Bigsby has had big runs throughout like the past 3 weeks, or all of the games that he has been healthy and relevant in, he has had at least a chunk play, a big run. He has looked the part a bit more than Travis Etienne has. Now, Etienne has been a bit banged up, but we were saying last week that Bigsby probably needs to be rostered, especially by the ETN owner, kind of like the Bucky Irving thing.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, I mean, going into this next week, I don't see a world where people are not just unloading fab on this guy after that performance.
Yeah.
You don't know necessarily whether it's going to be kind of a 1-2 punch for the rest of the year, and it could be a valuable ad. So, a hell of a performance out of Tank Bigsby. Definitely looking forward to see where this ends up as far as moving forward for the rest of the year, because this was the first time that Bigsby actually outsnapped him.
Yeah, and ETN did get injured in this one. Doug Peterson said he got popped pretty good in the shoulder, and that's why he was held
And
out.
he'd been dealing with that shoulder though. That's the my
That's
it
why
like
it's worth noting. Yeah,
it's not a thing that's gone away, and they've been playing him through. So it's either Travis Etienne's going to end up missing a game or two. Who knows?
yeah,
Might get. I'm not saying he'll get an IRR stint or anything, but he's either going to miss time, or you're going to see this timeshare be way more evenly split than any ETN owner is comfortable with.
for sure.
So there's just that moving forward, that concern with ETN. And even if he is injured, it's like one of those things where if he is playing this good, you know, kind of let's see what we
Yeah,
got at this point. But going into the receiver room, like I said, Brian Thomas Jr. is absolutely him. Didn't play the most snaps for the wide receiver core of the Jaguars. That would be Gabe Davis, but he did get the most targets. Got 8, and anybody else got 4. That was the most, or except for ETN got 7, but whatever. Brian Thomas caught 5 of his 8 targets for 122 and a touchdown, 23.2 points. Absolutely beautiful. Um, he's an every week start for me. I'm not even like him and Malik Neighbors. It's like, okay, they've
yeah,
arrived. I'm not even considering benching them at this point. So that's just where I'm at with him personally. Christian Kirk he showed up again, caught all 4 of his targets for 88 yards, 12.8 points for him. And then Gabe Davis, like I said, played the most of all the receivers, got 4 targets, caught 3 of them for 38 yards. So 7.8 points. Did I read that wrong?
4.8.
What did he do?
Fumbled, lost a fumble. He went
Just one?
3 for 38 on
Oh, it would
4
have been
targets.
6.8.
Yeah,
Yeah. That was my mistake. The math wasn't mathing there for a second. But he did lose a fumble. So 4.8 point. I had 4.8 written down. I was like, that can't be right.
yeah,
But yes, he did score 4.8. And yeah, I mean, it's going to be Brian Thomas, Christian Kirk, and whoever the tight end is, because Brenton Strange caught all 4 of his targets for 24 yards and a touchdown. 12.4 points out of him. Luke Farrell, another tight end, also added 2 catches on 2 targets for 17 yards. So Evan Ingram owners are wishing he gets back and gets back healthy, because there is opportunities to be had in this tight end room, and
for
we saw
sure.
what he did last year, and it's just 4 weeks in a row of not having him.
Yeah,
It's getting painful. And then Jags kicker added 14 points, so that was kind of cool. Cam Little.
yeah. Ugliest game of the week or what? Up there.
Yeah, let's make this quick. The Dolphins went into New England, beat the Patriots 15-10. Tyler Huntley was 18 for 31, 190. Damn, the dude still didn't break 200. 194 yards and an interception. 7.5 points out of him. He also added 7 yards on 3 attempts. Uh, Jalen Wright had 86 yards on 13 attempts and no targets or catches. Oh, obviously, HN was concussed early in this game, if you were wondering why. Jalen Wright was the first running back I mentioned. Raheem Mostert, though, had 19 carries for 80 yards. And he got 2 targets, which he caught both of for 18, 11.8 points for him. And then you had, obviously, of course, just like in the Minnesota game, it was let's get our fullback a touchdown this week. Alec Ingold got into the end zone for the Miami Dolphins. No, that was what it was. Tyreek had a serviceable week.
Yeah.
Like we said, it's like you can kind of keep him in there, but it's not really. He caught 6 of his 9 targets for 69 yards, 12.9 points. It's not horrible. It's livable.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, if you would have, like how we talked about starting Mooney over Reek, you would have been
It's
fairly
just
happy with it this week.
insane, though. You know what I mean? Like, it's such a
It
tough.
is, but it is where we're at because, we got to a point where I started Tucker Kraft in Dynasty over Mark Andrews.
Yeah.
And it's like
Yeah.
we've seen enough evidence of it so far, no matter how bad it tastes, it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So it sucks. It does, and it sounds disgusting, but it's what we have to do at this point.
Yeah.
Johnny Smith added 5 catches on his 8 targets for 62 yards. So he got 11.1 points. Jalen Waddle, 8 targets, caught 4 of them for 46, 8.6. And, I mean, yeah, Jason Sanders hit 3 of his 4 field goals. And, yeah, 12 fantasy points for him. Dolphins defense isn't even worth mentioning. I think they got like 7 points.
Yeah.
In a game where they allowed 10. So
Yeah, the New England side of the ball was just as ugly. Jacoby Brissett, he's just not. He's not capable of running this offense. I don't know if anyone is. I'm not here to just blame Jacoby Brissett for it, but obviously things aren't working with him. He was 18 of 34, 160 yards, carried it once for 10 yards, giving him 7.4. Obviously, our pass catchers absolutely felt it. 2 weeks ago, Demario Douglas had that solid game where he gave us 14.8. Then he gave us 4.3 last week. Then he pops back up and has another decent game. Catches 6 of his 9 targets for 59, giving us 11.9. It just,
I don't trust this offense enough to play around with Demario Douglas start. Where it's like if I'm gonna
no.
get burned, it's like, for example, how Dontavian Wicks. We'll talk about that later, but the 4 points out of him, I'd rather get burned like that, at least knowing that
Yeah.
the process was right, than if I play Demario Douglas based on a couple of good performances and he gets me 2 points, it's
Yeah.
like I deserved that because you know what the Patriots offense is, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Because
It's
on top of being by far their lead pass catcher, he also lost 2 fumbles. He would have finished with 15.9. He finished with 11.9.
Demario Douglas.
Yes. He had 6 catches. No, my math. Forget my math.
Okay, we're both
Forget my math.
we both did the same thing today, so it's okay.
Yeah, my math is off. My math is absolutely off. And I mean, outside of him,
Monday. We're good.
yeah, it's a long day. Kayshawn Booty got 5.4. Is it Booty?
I don't know, honestly. I don't watch
What
the
do you
Patriots
want
enough
from
to
me,
know.
man?
It
It's
just sounds funny.
Yeah, it's ugly. Jalen Polk gave us 2.3. He played 100% of the snaps, caught 1 of his 6 targets. Kendrick Bourne returned. He's not fully healthy yet, had a catch. Hunter Henry had 2 catches for 32, giving us 5.2. He'll always get a couple catches, but never enough for us to, feel comfortable. Joey Sly missed a field goal, but made an extra point, gave us 3. Mondre Stevenson, the one guy we're really interested in here, was not the starter coming into this one. He actually played the same amount of snaps as Antonio Gibson. Antonio Gibson got 52 yards on his 6 carries, caught his lone target for 4 yards. It gave him 6.6. And then Mondre reappeared, had a really good run in this one. And I felt like one with the buys, I had to start him, but I did feel confident against this Dolphins defense. He could be a guy that could perform a bit, and he did. He got 89 yards on his 12 carries for a touchdown. Caught all 4 of his targets for 3 yards. The yards per target on the season to these running backs has been disgusting. Outside of like one big play for Antonio Gibson, the entire season, the yards per target has been abysmal. But Ramondre gives us 19.2. We do look for some better weeks from him to come. And one potentially positive note, I don't know if it'll make the offense better. Gerard Mayo did not commit to Jacoby Brissett as the starter for next week against Houston. We did just see Josh Allen struggle heavily against Houston.
I thought you were going to say Ramondre didn't fumble.
No, I mean, he did not fumble. That's worth noting. Yes, he did not fumble.
His first game without a fumble.
First game without a fumble. It could be Drake May next week. I don't know. But again, they're going to play the Texans that we just saw Josh Allen struggle heavily against. I'm not saying that exact thing's going to happen again, but I don't love the matchup. And speaking of not loving the matchup, the Panthers taking on the Bears in Chicago got absolutely steamrolled. Andy Dalton had, to be fair, his worst game of his short stint so far. He was 18 of 28 for 136 yards, did not throw a touchdown, threw an interception, carried it once for 3 yards, giving us 4.74 fantasy points before he was benched at the very end of that one. I mean, you could say benched, you could say any team that's down that much is putting in the backup at the end. But in this case, it only looks worse because it's the franchise quarterback they drafted coming in.
It's the same thing every time the Raiders go back and forth with
Aiden O'Connell.
It's like this. It's not a good look.
No. Only in cases like this. Like it. Not reading into it too much, but you know, Bryce Young went 4 of 7, 58 yards, had a carry for 8. Is what it is. It is worth noting, though. You know, this was his 3rd game in a row on the bench. I don't know how much longer they're going to keep Bryce Young on the bench. I promise you he will be back sooner than later playing games for them. Not only did you draft him number 1, what you gave up to get him number 1. You spent way too much to not play this thing out to the very end and make sure he is not the guy. It's just how it has to be honest. Jonathan Brooks did not return just yet. And Chuba Hubbard is giving the Panthers a reason to take their time bringing out Jonathan Brooks as much as most of us may not want it to be the case, but Chuba's been very efficient. He was 13 for 97 yards and a touchdown, caught all 4 of his targets for -2. Still gives us about 4 fantasy points there, though. Gave us 17.5. He's been very solid as of recent. Miles Sanders does Miles Sanders things, carries it twice for 6 yards, catches 2 of his 3 targets for 27. He's going to be the wide receiver or the running back 3 when Jonathan Brooks comes back, which is insane for the money they're paying him. It was a rough one. Our wide receivers didn't get it done. We knew the Bears have a good secondary. Jalen Johnson is a top corner, and Deontay had a rough game. He was targeted 6 times. He only caught 3 for 23 yards. He carried it twice for 6 yards, giving him 5.9. Another rookie, Jalen Coker, off the top ropes, had only played 10% of snaps last week, 1 target. He gets 4 targets in this one, catches all 4 for 68 yards to be their leading receiver, giving him 10.8. I don't want to throw another name in here. I don't want this to get muddled again. And again, Xavier Legette did get hurt and missed the rest of this game. He only played 37% of the snaps, catching his lone target for 8 yards before that shoulder injury. He's not expected to miss times, and that is kind of what gave Jalen Coker the opening to come in and get play, but he did take advantage of it. Jonathan Mingo caught 2 of his 5 targets for 37 yards, giving him 5.7. It just was not a good week from everyone. The tight end, Jatavian Sanders, caught 3 of his 5 targets for 13, giving him 4.3. And I mean, that's really it. Shift's laughing at me. I did something wrong. I don't know what I did.
No, you didn't. It's just that wide receiver's name is just funny to me.
That's
We
his name,
saw.
man.
I know it is. I know it is. I know it is. But it is.
Yeah.
We actually saw a pretty good. Now, again, it was against the Panthers, but there was one throw that Caleb made in the back of the end zone to DJ Moore that was absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, was the reason why they went out and drafted him. He was 20 for 29 in this one, 304 yards and 2 touchdowns. And he also ran the ball 5 times for 34 yards, so 23.6 fantasy points for him.
There it is.
Um, yeah, I mean that's just great to see, especially as a Caleb Williams fan. It was nice.
Yeah.
DeAndre Swift. We asked the question, since we're all starting him this week, is he going to do the old thing? No, he didn't. 21 attempts for 73 yards and a touchdown. Also caught both of his targets for 47 yards. So 20 points for Swift. Another great week. Looks like he's found his footing in this offense, and this offense is kind of starting to figure themselves out as well.
Yeah.
DJ Moore, or how can I forget Roshan Johnson and his 10 carries for 25 yards and 2 touchdowns. I can't because the Bears can't. Swift got 67% of the snaps and Roshan got 31. Khalil Herbert is just
He's gone.
down to playing. He's special teams, like he's just not there. 4% of the snaps on offense.
Yeah.
But so that was that. And I think I'm fairly confident moving forward in a good matchup with Swift. I think the way running backs are looking, you're not having much of a choice but to start him. And you
Yeah.
know he's going to have bad games. So it's just keep that in mind.
Yeah.
DJ Moore had a great day. Caught 5 of his 8 targets for 105 and 2 touchdowns. So 27.5 points for him. And then, I mean, what is there to really question about DJ Moore? I'm starting him and not really too worried
Yeah.
about that. Cole Kmet caught 3 of his 4 targets for 57, so 8.7 points for him. Roma Dunze added 5 catches on 6 targets for 40, so 9 points, which isn't bad at all. And then 3 on 6 targets for 33 yards for Keenan Allen, 6.3 points. Gerald Everett had to get some involvement, caught both of his targets for 22, 4.2 points out of him, 6 points out of Cairo Santos. Moving forward, definitely comfortable with DJ Moore. Hoping that it's like Rome Odunze is the number 2 there, and Keenan Allen's kind of just here and there. But on a week in, week out, I'm just very comfortable with DJ Moore, and Caleb is looking like he can start to be sort of a streaming option at this point,
Yeah.
which is pretty cool to see.
Yeah.
So now on to our final game. One game to be played, and I'm not saying that the Saints and Chiefs can't put on a show, but dare I speak a little early and say that this was the game of the week. It's probably going to be a candidate for game of the year. The Ravens, it was the best game in this rivalry, points wise. The Ravens went into Cincinnati and beat the Bengals in overtime by the grace of the football gods, 41-38. The most ridiculous things happened in this game, but I think my favorite one of all was seeing Derrick Henry take that run in overtime, and basically he didn't score the touchdown, but
He
he got
iced
down to
it.
the 6 and he iced it and gamed the Bengals. He did that to us in 2020 on the Titans in overtime.
Yeah.
So seeing him do that for us instead of against it, it was a great feeling.
Yeah.
A feeling similar to that shared by all of the Lamar Jackson owners in fantasy football.
Oh yeah.
20 42, 348 yards, 4 touchdowns. Also added 55 yards on 12 attempts. Lost a fumble, which I don't know how I mean, he loses the fumble. The Bengals play super concerned, and I get it. It's like you don't want to take the risk of getting a sack or turnover, so they run the ball 3 times, get 3 yards, and the holder just completely botched it,
Yeah.
and McPherson misses from 50 plus. But yeah, so 33.4 points out of Lamar Jackson in another amazing performance. Derrick Henry also had another great one, 15 attempts and 92 yards. Granted, 51 of those yards came on that overtime run.
He
So
was
that
having a rough run game before that last carry for sure.
he was. They were doing a very good job bottling up the run, but as you can see from Lamar's passing line,
Yeah.
they were able to figure it out in other facets. Which, man, Zay Flowers really did get it done this game. Caught 7 of his 12 targets for 111 yards, so 19 points out of him. You never would guess it, but Charlie Collar was the second most involved pass catcher, grabbing 3 of his 4 targets for 64 yards and a touchdown. His long reception was 55 yards, but that was not the same play as his touchdown. His touchdown was like 2 or 3. So he's going to be involved in the offense. All the tight ends are. I mean, he's not one that I'm. He's not. I don't think he's going to be fantasy relevant on a weekly basis, but he will have appearances.
Yeah.
Rashad Bateman, loved what I saw out of him in this one. He caught 4 of his 8 targets for 54 and a touchdown. I mean, this is honestly like the role that I was hoping he would play, and he is doing well in. Like, I don't need an extremely like world beating wide receiver one. Like, just be a solid wide receiver too.
Yeah.
And that's what we're getting. And good day out of him, 15.8 points. Oh yeah, and 15.6 out of Kolar. Mark Andrews. Man,
Yeah.
I mean, it's great to see. He caught 4 of his 5
Yeah.
targets for 55, 9.5 points out of him. Tylan Wallace even got some involvement, caught both of his targets for 31. But Isaiah Likely, if you happen to start him this week, it was a good week to do such a thing. And this is the reason why I said he's going to end up as a top 5 tight end. Because, yes, he only gets 3 targets. Yes, he only catches 2 of them. Yes, it's only for 13 yards, but 2 touchdowns. And Lamar just trusts him around the end zone. He has great hands. He's a big body guy that, for some reason, can just jump hella high. And I mean, it's a good option in the red zone and in the end zone. So he's going to score touchdowns throughout this season, which I do believe is going to keep him at or around the top 5 tight ends, just because we know what it's like.
Yeah.
Um, Justice Hill had 5 carries for 17 yards, and also he caught 1 of his 2 targets in this one for 8 yards. I mean, 3.5 points out of him. He didn't have the most involvement. They were It was just the way this game went. I think my favorite part about it was that there are some years that the Ravens get down by a couple scores, and it's like, oh well, there goes that one. But they showed in this one when the run game isn't going to just work every time, and the other team gets up, that they have the capability to come back and actually throw the ball effectively.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it was refreshing as a Ravens fan, and it had to be fantasy player, because if you had Zay Flowers, he was getting to the point where it's like, okay, can I start him? And
Yeah.
it's going to be kind of a more matchup dependent thing. I believe if when the Ravens are going up against a team that can score points, i.e. next week, the Washington Commanders, Zay could be a good start. Likely could be a
For
good
sure.
start. Andrews could be a good start, because the Ravens pass defense is Oh my God, I don't know what. And granted, we know what this Bengals offense can be, but it's looking kind of like food for whoever's playing against the Ravens secondary right now.
Yeah, it has not looked the greatest, to be
It
fair.
hasn't, and that's just the fact of the matter is the offense can keep up. So
Yeah.
I'm looking for games that the Ravens are in with high over-unders, like next week.
Oh,
Those are
yeah.
games I do believe you can start your Ravens. So this was good to see. Oh, 13 points from Justin Tucker. Can't forget that.
He was
Thank you,
solid.
David, for letting me pick him up. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And like you said, outside of being a Bengals fan, everyone that had pieces of this Cincinnati bye got
Oh,
basically what they asked for in this one, if not more. The three-headed monster of Cincinnati absolutely ate. Joe Burrow was 30 for 39, 392 yards, 5 touchdowns, an interception, 2 carries for a yard, 34.78. Him and Lamar both had incredible weeks. And you can imagine with all those yards, where did they go? Basically all to his main two guys. How it should be, though. Jamar Chase catches 10 of his 12 targets for 193 yards and 2 touchdowns, giving him 41.3. T. Higgins catches 9 of his 14 targets for 83 yards with 2 touchdowns, giving him 29.3. Just monster weeks out of those two guys. And if you were wondering how Andre Yoshivas, who still is on the field a majority of the time, is faring with these two guys getting back to full speed, he was only targeted twice. He caught one pass for 39 yards, giving him 4.9. It's going to show he's not going to be viable fantasy-wise when you have T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. And with
just a note on that real quick. This is a this is one thing we called for before this game. We
yeah,
said the Bengals are getting back into form, and when they are in their top, like their offense is in its top shape, 26 targets to T and Jamar is what it should look like.
mm-hmm,
2 targets to this is what it should look like.
yeah,
So, like I was saying, I think the Yoshivas experience is over, and rightfully so, because the two dogs are out. This is what we
yeah,
wanted. Like, oh, we've been waiting for like 2 years, pretty much.
yeah. No,
Like,
yes, yes. To actually see all of them healthy together, yeah, it's been a
yeah,
while.
and playing like this, yeah.
It has been a while. And speaking of healthy, Zach Moss, his ankle is a little bit banged up. He did still play 67% of the snaps in this one. He carried it 9 times for 24 yards. He caught 3 of his 4 targets for 28. He had 8.2. Kind of a down week. And, Chase Brown, with his limited involvement, only played 33% of snaps. He was more efficient on the ground, 12 carries for 46 yards. He was a little less efficient through the air. He caught all 3 of his targets for 8, but he got in the end zone. And that's your difference maker right there. He gets 16.4, a better day for Chase Brown. And like Schiff mentioned, I'm sure there were fantasy owners that were backed into the wall of having to start him, and he came through
He
for you.
also got a 2 point conversion.
Yes, yes.
That I was like, there was a reason why he got those extra. He got a 2 point conversion as well. So
Yeah, so it pushed him over the top a little bit. And, I mean, he had a better week than Zach Moss, but again, I think this offense, when they're running at the highest power, there's a world where both these guys potentially can have decent weeks. But we
I
will.
agree, and I think just looking at the Bengals as a whole, actually, not just as their offense, their defense is bad, and they just lost Dax Hill, so it's going to be even easier to pass on them.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, like get better Dax Hill, but that's a fact. Another fact is, I mean, you get opportunities, at or around the goal line. It's not just all going to be to Jamar and T, like we saw in this one. Chase Brown gets in the end zone. If
Mm-hmm.
you're on a good team and you have that many opportunities to score and they're constantly scoring a lot of points, that yeah, I think Chase Brown, this is why like I got I held on to both of them knowing that it was going to be like, okay, I have the entirety of the Bengals backfield in our dynasty league. Things like that. Why I picked Chase Brown up. It's going to be, yeah, the first little chunk of the first month of the season was kind of rough,
Yeah.
but moving forward, this is going to be an amazing offense. If you have pieces of it, hold them. Do not trade them. Trade for them if you can. And honestly, the window might be up to acquire one of these guys.
Yeah, no, for sure. And outside of those, I don't think the tight ends are going to hold enough weight for us to look at as viable options, especially with the splits that they have. Gesicki was only targeted twice, caught him for 31. Eric All was only targeted twice, caught those for 10, giving him 3. Eric All played 52%, Gesicki played 43. It just, I don't think there's enough meat left at that tight end position for this offense. And then Evan McPherson finishes with 3, and that's mainly because, he kicked the 4 extra points and he missed that field goal. I'm not sitting here like, oh, he would have for sure made the field goal. But, had the holder held it and he potentially makes it, you're looking at a 9-point fantasy finish instead of a 3-point. So that's a bit of a swing. Worth noting on that. But obviously the defense did not do good.
No, neither defense did good. We're not even going to mention that. It was just kind of odd. Like, as well as the Bengals had been moving the ball the entire game, I understand, like, on that possession before, and maybe they just assumed had they stepped back to pass, the Ravens were just going to bring the house. But I've seen Joe Burrow throw so many touchdowns on plays like that. It was just confusing to me how conservative they were, settling for a 50-plus yard
I
field goal.
agree. I
When it's
agree.
like you could have, I don't know. That's just where I was at with that, especially when you're going in with the possibility of being 1-4. It was just confusing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that
It's
was
an
all
action-packed
from
one.
us. Yeah, and that was just the morning game. Um, we definitely saw the witching hour come into full effect in favor of my team one time. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that was crazy. My Ravens are usually on the opposite side of those. But yeah, we will be back in our next one with all of the afternoon games as well as the Sunday night game and however this Monday night game turns out.
Yeah.
If you have any Saints or Chiefs, good luck to you. And Derek, you got anything else to add?
No, I am out of breath, to be honest.
Yes, I am just about as well. So, at that, we're going to leave you guys. Thank you once again for all the support. And as we say every time, come back next time, take more reps with the first team.
Yes, sir.